Okay, the final result is about fact checking. Again, non-existent. Fact checking as a solution for misinformation, especially in this context on WhatsApp, is useless. Like it's really, nobody knows about fact checking, nobody cares about fact checking. There's a lot of content that is already fact checked going back 10 years. It's the same content that's fact checked over and over in mainstream fact checking sources. It does not reach these audiences. Nobody knows about this, nobody cares around this. So around 40% of our data, even today, again, like if I open that dashboard today, I can show you memes or misinformation images that were shared 10 years ago, that were debunked 10 years ago, right? And this is one very favorite example of mine. This is claiming to be, Rajiv Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi praying like Muslims, taken out of context. This was fact-checked like starting from 2015, every year, right? 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019, 2020, like, still, like, this is today spreading on WhatsApp, right? Like, so it does not work. Okay, so what are solutions for this? Like, what can we do? So again, like the main issue here is this is a very hard problem because of encryption. Like, so WhatsApp does not have access to the content. So if you take other platforms like Facebook or Twitter, they can just hire a lot of moderators, and you can build your machine learning models on top of them, and then you can moderate content, right? You can say, oh yeah, this is hateful, this is not, or you identify that this same thing is spreading again, and you take this down or down rank or do things like that. WhatsApp cannot see the content, so you cannot have a central content moderation. And there's very limited stuff that WhatsApp can do. Like one is this sort of top-down, which is imposing frictions on virality, like so limiting the number of forwards you can do. Again, we have a paper that shows that that does not work. I mean, it works to slow things down, but if you have an invested actor like this, which who has this 150,000 members to just spread your content, they can just do it over and over, right? Like if you can just forward 5 people at a time or 1 person at a time, you just do it over and over. Like so that's not stopping anyone. And there are these bottom-up solutions that currently exist, which is based on crowdsourcing. It's this called this tip line, which is you set up a WhatsApp number and users forward tips to that. And WhatsApp is actually tips as in content, and they ask, hey, is this true or not? WhatsApp is funding a lot of these tip lines, which exist in like fact checkers and journalist newsrooms, where they monitor these phone numbers, WhatsApp numbers, and if they get something, they will fact check it, and send a response back. And so, I worked on, so it looks like this. So you get a piece of content, and then a bot will respond, and then a human will look at it, and then fact check it if it has not already been fact checked. So I worked on building some technology to scale this sort of fact checking, and this really can scale up, like, because the technology is quite good these days. So there are a lot of tip lines working in 6 Indian languages, 11 tip lines by different journalists, newsrooms, and fact-checking organizations, some of them very big. But the issue is that this is not scalable. Like, so this does not work at the WhatsApp scale. Right? Like, to tell you a number, WhatsApp had this very big tip line, or very massively advertised tip line, if you remember, during the 2019 election. They really did a lot of PR on this. They advertised this in national and international media that, hey, send your misinformation to this phone number and we'll get it fact checked. I worked on that data. So we got 100,000 tips during the 3-month election period. Just, again, 100,000 might seem like a large N. Just in context, every day on WhatsApp, there are 55 billion messages sent, right? Like, so take that by 30, multiply that by 30. Like, so out of that, 100,000 were actually sent here. So an opt-in model is not the right way. I mean, or at least it does not work. So we are working on like variants of that, where we can think of like having someone in your network actually do the fact checking, instead of having like a stranger fact checker where you actually have to send it to a fact checker. Because a large amount of misinformation can be easily debunked, subjective, but does not have to be a trained fact checker. You either reverse image search. Again, my data shows that 40% of it is already debunked. Right? You reverse image search to find a link, just say, hey, this is not true, right? And crowdsourced fact checking, there's community notes and all of that. That is something that works, right? Like, so instead of having it top down, have it bottom up, and then you can do some sort of technology on top of that. Like, if you can in an encrypted setup, you can identify that this is already debunked. You can do something like that, and probably this is the only way that you can fact check on encrypted platforms. Again, how this is exactly operationalized is not clear. We are trying to think of a way to actually run a study that kind of incentivizes people in networks where you can try to debunk misinformation. But I don't have any results there. Okay, so what are next steps? One is building better data collection tools with better sampling, including privacy. So one issue we have is, okay, this worked in India because we have a network of surveyors that could go door to door or could recruit people who people can trust. We want to do this in the US, right? Like so, and that does not work. And US has a large set of population that uses WhatsApp. This kind of door to door or like going surveyors actually recruiting people, that does not work in the US. So we need to think of different models. And we have another model which is very privacy preserving, which is like an app that people install and it computes some sort of aggregate statistics on the device. So we're working on some of those. But another extension to what I showed you is something that we're very excited about, is scaling up like this sort of thing with opt-in data donation. So we're trying to do, instead of 300 users, we're trying to do 3,000 users. So doing it all across India for the election that's coming up. So sample like 12 districts, 10 villages in each district, and then 25 samples in each location. There are quota samples. You get people from different caste, age, religion, probably political party. And so we're also going to do something similar in Brazil. And US, again, is minor because I'm pretty sure this will not work in the US. We are trying other models that might work. But yeah, the idea is we want to do something where we have infrastructure that can really detect these narratives on WhatsApp and kind of at least we have some pulse of like what is spreading there without being contested at all, and do some sort of awareness as these spread, like so either some sort of debunking within these communities in some way. So that's the idea. So just to summarize, data collection on WhatsApp is very hard, and I showed you different techniques with different sampling frames. And now we have the ability to identify viral content on WhatsApp. Again, we may not be able to say what part of viral content this is, how are we sampling this exactly, but because this is viral, according to some definition on WhatsApp, this is, you can get some understanding that, about the prevalence of misinformation. So, okay, the punchline is the misinformation may not be common. Like we also did some analysis on this data set, not just looking at the viral content, but on actual stuff. And misinformation is not common. Like again, if you look at a general person's feed, the fraction of content that is misinformation is still very low. It's in the low single digits. But if you look at the viral content, it's much, much higher, like I said, a quarter or something that high. Looking at it from the politics perspective, large-scale spread of misinformation on WhatsApp is very hard and requires extraordinary investment, right? Like think about the investment it takes, if you're maintaining hundreds of thousands of workers, a content farm that creates content and then kind of spreads all of this stuff, that's super expensive. And even if this infrastructure is built, right, so it's not guaranteeing you that that this content is going to spread outside of your infrastructure. So you only have control over your infrastructure. So, and one thing we realize is, okay, there is success here, right? So we see a lot of BJP content spreading outside of the BJP network. So that is success, they've really cracked this. But we don't know the impact, we don't know if this does actually matter for election, right? Karnataka, where this 150,000 members were used and a lot of WhatsApp strategy was done, did not work out. So what is the actual impact? I don't know. Solutions for correction of misinformation are still in their infancy. Okay, so this is a summary. Now, some commentary, just two pieces. First is, misinformation and hate speech on WhatsApp is not dangerous because there's a lot of it, right? The usual thing that we think about when we think about WhatsApp is, oh yeah, I get a lot of misinformation. It's actually not true. So there's not a lot of it, but it's precisely because these are interspersed with innocuous content from trusted sources. Right? So this is a platform where you get your trusted information from your trusted sources. So if you intersperse that with misinformation, again, I'm not saying this is by design, but this is what's happening. Right? So that's what worked. So the influence and power of WhatsApp is not in its ability to distribute large quantities of misinformation at a very low cost, but in its ability to kind of expose this sort of trustful communities to selective misinformation. So I think this is kind of the most important takeaway from this is this sort of aspect of trust. I mean, we haven't explored that, but looking at the sort of prevalence of all of these and viral content, normal content, all of that, I think this is the most important part that sets WhatsApp apart from some of these other social media platforms. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Just a couple of questions. Thank you for this talk. It was really fascinating. Why villages? Why not urban India? What is given that internet use is much more in urban, especially WhatsApp, presumably, posting on Twitter and so on and so on. So why are you focusing only on villages and not any urban India, on urban India? That's one. Second, why only UP? Why not Tamil Nadu or where there might be an anti-BJP narrative that, especially Tamil Nadu, now with Sanatan Dharma and all of that stuff that's happening. That was the second thought I had. Third, have you looked at the profile pictures? Do you think that might reveal something about the kind of person or the sort of information that itself might convey to one, when you're going through the messages and then looking at misinformation, coding it as misinformation or hate speech or something. I mean, my aunts have a flag of India, things like that. So yeah, that was it. And one other thing, maybe if you're looking at villages, have you thought of going through voter lists and then selecting a sampling frame based on voter lists, rather than just going arbitrarily from door to door, have at least some kind of a structure that would allow you to go from household to household or select certain households?
Yeah, sure. So for the villages in UP, so the village part is that, it's deliberate. Like the reason is just that, we also are very interested in what this first-time internet users are consuming, right? Like, so these are a majority of the Indians, like hundreds of millions of people are coming online for the first time. A lot of these people are on WhatsApp. So that's the kind of narrative that we wanted to understand. Like, okay, what are these people actually consuming? The second thing about UP, and partially an answer to this thing about villages, is just convenience and practicality. Okay, we have our team in UP. The people know the stuff there. They can identify influencers there. So it's very easy for us to start with this in UP, especially given the kinds of things that we're doing here. Right? So you're asking someone, okay, if I come to your house and ask, hey, can you give us your WhatsApp data, we pay some money, that's a very fishy thing. Like, and it's a very, so we require, like, just even doing this as a pilot, like, we're not sure if this is going to work, how that's going to work, how people are going to react. And so it had to be in an area where we had some sort of know-how of the landscape, know the people, identify, like, where people will trust us and things like that. Now, once we want to scale this up, actually, Tamil Nadu or Karnataka will be one of the states where we are going to get a district where we are going to sample for information. West Bengal is probably the other where we are also going to get, like, in the expansion, the larger set that we are planning to do. But again, it's mostly about convenience and practical aspects, like where can we actually have a team that is where it's safe for them as well, right? Like, so there's also concerns about that. So so that's the answer. About the profile pic, no, like we are deliberately trying to minimize the amount of data we collect. Like, already we are really getting a lot of data with all the messages in these groups and all of that, like from non-consented users, we do anonymization, all of that, but we're not getting any profile pictures just to minimize the kind of data we get. Like, because already this is super rich data that we're getting, we're actually getting all the messages, right? So we're not getting that. Voter list to sample, again, like the main problem with that too is like it gives you a representative sample, but it does not give you a representative sample of WhatsApp use, right? Like, so even if we are able to sample randomly through voter list, it is not a guarantee that this person we reach is going to actually use WhatsApp and use WhatsApp actively so they can give us a decent amount of data given the limited resources, money, and infrastructure we have, right? Like, so that's the reason. Like, I mean, a random sample could easily be done through a voter list, but yeah, again, like, it's probably not practical for our. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, like, this is incredible research. So, like, thank you for doing it. Many of us are social scientists in the room, so it's like pretty incredible just to see this kind of wealth of informative information and just like the creativity with which you're kind of trying to collect this data. So it's incredible. I just like, I'm a political scientist, and so there are two things that you've said that kind of like really just explain a lot of what's happening today. But I had a bit of a chicken and egg issue, which has to do with, why the BJP, why not other parties, and why the content that is trending is this kind of content and the kind of ability to take back the narrative. And so, the first thing that you said early on in the talk, and I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more about it when you were just showing the aggregate figures for, I think, like data 1 and 2 about how actually misinformation is not that much, right? Like, so, but you were saying, so okay, so why are these people in these groups? And you said, you just kind of said, well, it's because of a sense of community, right? And then also this whole thing of these good morning messages, like what are these good morning messages, what they're doing? And so when I think of like two things that seem to be happening, one that you didn't touch much about but mentioned, and the other that you did, right? Like why do political parties, if you hear the kind of the classic literature on why they become important, especially ideological political parties, one is a sense of community, the other is this kind of narrative. It gives you, so it both gives you a place in the world and it gives you a narrative through which to make sense of your place in the world. And so it seems as if like, that's what's clearly happening, right? It's both happening. And so I was wondering, one, if you could talk a little bit more about like, what is that place of community within this, especially because I think that point that you mentioned, which is the reason why this is so dangerous, is because it is coming from within your community, right? Like this innocuous, so I was wondering like if you could talk a little bit like that missing part of the community plus the narrative. And then related to that, I'm still like kind of this hand-wringing, which is why are other parties not able to do this? Are they not trying? Do they not have the kind of infrastructure in terms of the devotion? Or is it that they're trying but not succeeding? But what would success mean? Do we even have some instances, and maybe this is Siddharth's point about Tamil Nadu, or do we have any kind of even a small case study of something that is not this, that succeeds? Not that there can't be misinformation that's not like Hindu nationalist, right? So I'm just kind of curious about that. I had smaller questions, but I'll stop there.
Sure. Yeah, I think the answer to both, and we were discussing during lunch with Arushi, is so there is support for these narratives in the society, like the Hindu majority. I think that's what Ravish was also saying. The Hindu majority bloc that exists already was talking about these sorts of things in their family, personal conversations, and things like that. And if someone comes and provides you this sort of entertaining meme or video content that actually promotes those biases, like you're happy to just say forward and yeah, okay, and these kinds of platforms are just making it easy to amplify those sorts of narratives, right? Like, so I think that's at play with a majority of this, and that's where like a lot of the BJP content is really viral organically, because yeah, it actually corresponds to what the biases that these people actually believe and say personally, privately. Now they can easily say that online and spread it to their networks and can get that, right? So I think that's one reason why the BJP is very successful at this. So have other parties not tried? They have tried. Like if you see the distribution of the groups that we have from SP, like there are around 30% of the groups were from SP. But again, like this is a very, very hard thing to achieve and requires a lot of like devotion and like top-down investment from the party saying this is important. And you saw that investment, right? Like with 150,000 members, that's huge. And they're working on social media. Again, I don't believe that 100,050 number, but it's still like a very, very large number, right? Like, and I don't think any other like local political party either has that sort of resources or is dedicated enough. I mean, most of these local political parties, Congress could do it. They're not doing it. And it's not like, yeah, you just create a few groups, and this we saw in 2019. Okay, Congress is also creating some groups and trying these things. it doesn't work unless you have all these pieces. You have to have the people, you have to have the groups, you have to have the content, you have to have really meaningful content that supports like what people believe, right? Like for that to actually go viral and happen, that's a very, very hard thing to do. And unless some significant investments are made, like this cannot happen. And nobody has really been able to match this. And so, particularly, also we saw some other political parties, like some parties in Andhra are trying that Twitter trending thing. Like it's nowhere really as successful. Again, these are people who have been doing this for a decade, right? Like, so it's a well-oiled machine at this point. Like so, those things just cannot be replicated very easily. It's not like just a few months before the election you set up your WhatsApp, your social media system, and so it does not work that way. So I think that's the reason why we don't see it. Yeah.
Two finger. So this again is the Tamil Nadu question, right? So then when I think about like what can be done, right? And then I think, okay, so then I wonder whether there's like an existing kind of alternate platform, by platform I mean within WhatsApp, but a set of groups that can be co-opted. And here I'm thinking back to the 50s and 60s about how like, the AIA DMK came into power. And what they did was they really mobilized like film, and this gets back to, what about the SRK fan groups and the kind of, because what they did was and this was obviously pre-internet era, but they really mobilized these like fan societies, which existed almost like kind of classic civil society across the rural landscape of Tamil Nadu. And so I'm wondering, like, are there like, so when I think, for instance, of the ADMK, are there like, I mean, he's quite like, obviously MGR is like a yesteryear star, but I'm just wondering, are there like I'm just thinking of like just film like actor appreciation fan groups that through which I'm thinking experimentally, but I'm just thinking like would that be the way to do it in terms, because I'm responding to your point about the fact that the reason why the BJP is successful is because there is this kind of like Hindutva hate that exists organically, and so then when you kind of get this, you can say, okay, this is not my personal view, someone else is saying, and so you go out and forward it. So I'm just kind of wondering if you want to kind of have that similar alliance in a way between what's being put out and your kind of affective, investment in such things, then other affective investments are other kind of civil society kind of things. And so I was just kind of curious about whether that's happening, is it a possibility?
Yeah, it's probably happening. Like I'm not at this scale. Like I mean, nobody's able to compete with this sort of infrastructure. I mean, we haven't looked at it from that venue, like with that angle. Like, but if I show you, I removed that slide just because it's too much information. But like if you look at the types of groups that exist. Okay. So these are the types of groups that we have in our sample. Right? So village, caste, religious. Hindutva, religious is benign religious, like just the Jai Sri Ram, not just the happy good morning with religious stuff. But Hindutva is like the BJP, pro-BJP kind of groups. Then there's activism, regional, and others. Others is the majority category, which has a bunch of it's a broad umbrella of I know we're preparing for a job, we're preparing for civils, and this is a group, or we are a group of friends in this neighborhood, and this is our group. So we do not look in detail at these groups, like specifically, and say, for instance, what is in these groups, or what are there a subset of groups that actually makes sense in this set? Probably there is, I'm not sure, but I think that's a very interesting aspect. Like, what is a good counter to this, or should we just give up and say, okay, this is already captured space, and we don't really, I don't know.
Yeah, I would look at the others in terms of like Bollywood or particular actor fan groups, because that of the others is something that. What can I ask? What is activism?
Activism is mostly about we need government jobs. Like a bunch of those kind of stuff. Like it's mostly about
Just to follow up to that, I was wondering the reason that you don't see a lot of anti-BJP content is, could it also be because those people are hiding and don't want their information to go out to any researcher?
Not necessarily, right? When we ask people what political parties they support, there is still a non-negligible amount of pro BJP, pro so this is in UP, right? Like so, 45% of it is non-BJP supporters. So they are part of maybe not a part of political groups that are pro SP, for instance, but still there might be something that is not pro BJP there, right? So there should be something. I mean, it's not that it's 95% 5%, which the results are showing that 95% or 99% is pro BJP, which.
But there is a difference between voting not BJP and posting on Facebook, and then on the news, you see someone got arrested.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a very good question actually. If there is some sort of chilling effect of I'm not sure. That's a very good question.
Which I think would be a case to follow up on Arashi's to actually see what does anti-BJP content look like. What is just the realm of things that are being said? Because I think that there has to be that, right? How can you live in India today and not be bothered by
I mean, again, it could be there. It's not trending. It's not viral. In the sample we saw in these 2 months. Right? So again, it's a very biased sample, small sample, specific sample. But still, not having just having 1 out of 600 is still very, or 2 out of 600 is very surprising. But probably again, hopefully in the larger sample, or if you look at subsets, I mean, definitely it's on the viral content, but there might be something in some of these. If we specifically look at users who said we support SP or something, maybe there is some different type of content. It's not viral though. Yeah.
I'm sorry I missed your talk, so if there are any version of this question that you already answered, just discard them. So the first question is, I've always sort of wondered, why do you think there will be a relationship between social media or WhatsApp and voting? I see, for example, it was interesting you said that there's not really a relationship or you don't know, but I really want to understand why do you think there should be a relationship or there would be a relationship? So that's the first question. And the second question is, I mean, from what I've seen, I think there are lots of other descriptive identities which perhaps are more salient in voting than, let's say, what they are in social media. But did you see, for example, a breakdown of all your descriptive identity, whether it's religion, political party, or caste, and whether there are incentives to participate in misinformation or, sort of from the other side, reduce misinformation? So, for example, when I look at this number, 19% SP is actually a very clean breakdown of what the Muslim and Yadav population in UP is like. Obviously, not all Muslims or all Yadavs vote for some other party, but that's 12 plus 8 is exactly what 19% is. So do you think, for instance, this 19% SP is more invested in pushing back on the misinformation? So do you see those kinds of descriptive identities and differentiation in misinformation? Thank you.
Yeah. So if I answer the second question correctly, you're asking if someone posts misinformation, are we seeing any pushback for that? Is that
or you're seeing an incentive for someone who has a certain descriptive identity being more invested in pushing misinformation? So for example, in your case, I would assume that if you are a Thakur or a Brahmin in UP, you're more likely, or you're a non-Yadav OBC or a non-Jata Dalit, you're more invested in the BJP X propaganda. But if the identity is reversed, you're more invested in perhaps pushing back on that information with your own kind of information or disinformation.
We did not do analysis at that level. This is very recent data. Some of this is, probably we might be able to do this data, especially if we scale this up and get a larger sample. But that we did not specifically look at the actual content and what are the group level identities and what their messaging is. I mean, one thing is in general, right? So these are whatever groups we have. These are not political groups, and that ties to your first question. These are not political battlegrounds where someone is trying to advance their cause politically versus not like someone trying to advance their. So these are all like regular groups, like about a village or getting together, like where you live together and things like that. So I don't think, I mean, yeah, probably not like deliberately, so people are not really trying to win any points in promoting their own political party, that may not be happening. But yeah, beliefs might really reflect into what people forward and share, so that might happen, like I'm not sure. So yeah, that answers also that first question about, okay, why do we think social media and politics should be related? I'm not sure. I don't think it is related. I'm just saying, you know, if 1/5 of your content that is spreading virally is political related, like there, and you know, the surveys that show that people are spending X amount of hours every day on social media, then probably that has something to do with their beliefs and their. It may not translate into action, but at least reflects their beliefs, and that corresponds to some of these ideologies that the parties are pushing. So again, like that could be the reason why there could be some sort of relationship between that, but I don't know. I didn't make that claim.
Questions?
Can I just add? Just adding, kind of going with what Bhanu was saying, right? You didn't collect this information for users. You don't have user identity, right? You didn't do a survey of the user to kind of see whether what caste they belong to or what religion they belong to, right? That was something you didn't do. So it would be difficult to kind of look at the identity of the person who is. But just going on that, this is for users who donated the data, but not for all the users. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did do that for the influencers who
so both, like, so the person who recruited them, but also the person who gave the data, we have that. So this information is for these 300 users who gave us the data. We have their caste, their religion, their age. So we have that data. What we don't have is, so they might have given us data of a group of 50 people. We don't know who else is in that group, right? Like, so, and there the problem that could arise is that if it's a village group, there might be different castes, different communities. So who's pushing back what narrative and what is viral is not necessarily being that if I donate a group, it does not necessarily mean what is viral in the group I donated is my opinion, right? So that does not correspond one-on-one to what you donated. It could be others in that group, and we don't have their identity.
So I have a question about the second data collection methodology, especially maybe for the first also, but I think it's more relevant for second. So you said the second methodology was to go to all the political parties' offices and get added to the private groups. So I was just wondering, is it possible in your 500 group data set to see which users are in which groups? So I'm thinking about, like how does the network orientation look like? Is it like, for example, BJP groups are like everyone is connected to those groups, but SP groups are connected to only like a subset, and they're only connected to that group and not to Congress groups. So I was just wondering if you, like, for example, so each group is like belongs to a one party, and is it possible to see like which numbers users are like connected to which groups and look at
Yeah. So we have all the membership data, but it's partial data, right? So it's not a full network that you can construct. Right? So you only know in this group like who else is there. You don't know what groups they did not give us and what those memberships look like.
Yes.
So the missing part of the network could be non-randomly missing, so it could miss. So whatever you find, it may not. You cannot say anything about that.
Right, but you have the users like IDs for all these 500 groups. So I'm just thinking, like, within these 500 groups and these users, like, can you map them and see how the network orientation looks like?
Yeah, we can do that. We haven't done that.
Yeah, just because I'm thinking, like, what if, for example, majority of users are connected to only BJP groups and only BJP groups, and small proportion of the population is connected to SP and small. So in that sense, the viral content might be more for BJP because there's larger population connected to that, or whether maybe it's a different orientation.
I mean, that is certainly the case. Okay, even in this data set, okay, you can see 60% of the groups we got were BJP related, right? Like, in the other data set, like it's over 50% is still BJP related. So BJP definitely is a majority in these, and like I said, this infrastructure and the content ecosystem, all of that exists just because, okay, there is a top-down push and they've done this for over a decade and all of that stuff, right? Like, so, I think, I mean, looking at it from the network perspective might give us some information, but again, because the network is incomplete, like you really cannot say, okay, this is the reason why this is happening. We already know to a certain extent that, you know, the reason why viral content is mostly BJP is because they have a strategy, they have this top-down push, all of that, they have the IT cell, which is very active, all of that stuff. So, I mean, probably now, like, we have a better network setup, like when we are collecting this data, we're also getting each user, who are their contacts, and who did the people chat with, and we can map that with who sent what messages on those groups, and you can do some sort of network analysis there. We haven't thought through that yet, but yeah, that could be interesting.
Like, I guess I'm asking also because maybe from a different reason, like looking at whether the network is segregated in terms of how they connect to groups.
Mhm. Yeah.
Maybe not able to explain this, but like a
Yeah,
different question.
yeah. I think that'll be very interesting to look at, like whether networks and actual content really do match and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? We talked about solutions to misinformation. I was wondering, like, has anybody thought about solutions to hate speech? And because it seems like it's not even acknowledged as a problem, but what could be tried and has been tried, and is there hope?
Yeah. Okay. That's that's a PhD thesis. So, yeah. I mean, not sure. Like, so one thing that makes things like challenging in terms of correcting hate speech is like there are these counter speech narratives that people talk about and all that stuff. But yeah, because a lot of this is based on the true beliefs and beliefs over, like, you know, past decades and all of that stuff, it's a very hard intervention to actually make any sort of corrections. Yeah, I'm not sure actually, like, but I mean, okay, so one thing we also found, or we just found anecdotally, is again, just similar to the Indian community structure. There's usually in a village there's a structure, hierarchy, right? Like where there are, you know, different castes, then different religions. There's a certain hierarchy, and when people are in a village group, right? Like the way they talk is very different than when people are in a caste group. Like, so one of the results I showed is caste groups are super full of misinformation, hate speech, and stuff like that. They don't talk like that when they're in a village group, because, you know, either people of other religions are there, other castes are there. So thinking of, like, making use of some of these sorts of hierarchies that exist in the society, maybe using some sort of top-down way of correcting or like hate speech, for instance. Again, using authority as a way. I don't know what that exactly translates to, but that could be one way of doing things. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kiran, and we have a reception outside, so please join us and introduce yourselves to Kiran. So,
Yeah. Thanks a lot,
you.
everyone.